Well, today I want to get deeper into how I organize my images, and I would like to show some of the customization I do in Lightroom, because with my images I find that I shoot so many images and I'm not using them necessarily for particular projects, where when I'm done with a shoot I process them and deliver them to a client and then not think about that folder anymore. Instead, I get an archive of images that just keeps building up and gets bigger and bigger, and then I need to use those images for all sorts of things, like teaching this class. I got to pick out the images for this class. Also, I prepare images to have large prints made. My favorite thing to do with my images is to print them 5 feet wide on canvas, and that's how I like to present them. And if you're going to print something that big, you need to make sure that they're refined. So if somebody's not going to walk up to it and find little problems with the image, because I find they can be distracted by a technical issue in an image and not just enjoy it as a whole. So there's some customization I do in Lightroom to make that process easier. It's not going to be appropriate for everyone. You have to adapt it for your own needs, but this will give you one idea on how you could use it, and then you'll just have to think about how does that align with what you need to do with your images, and how could you adapt it. So anyway, let's take a look at a few things. First off, when we're in Lightroom, you've noticed before that at the top of your screen we have the various modules on the right side, and let's say you're going to have a client come in and look at your images. Wouldn't it be nice to not necessarily advertise that you're in Lightroom, so that when the client comes in, they have no idea what this is. Instead, it looks like your own custom software. I just want to show you quickly how to change that. That's known as the identity plate. But this isn't the only thing it's going to be used for. When we create things like slideshows, which we'll talk about later, or even some print-related things, we can use the same information to be either overlaid on our picture, or let's say that it starts or ends our slideshow, so that it can start with your logo or some other identity information. So if you want to change that area in the upper left, one way of doing it is to go to the Lightroom menu, and that's where you're going to find Identity Plate Setup. And in here, I can either use this by typing in text, or to use a graphic identity plate. And so if you use the text one, you can just type in text down here, your name, your studio name, whatever you'd like. And if you select the text, you can then choose the font you'd like to use, the size, and if you click this small little square on the right, you can choose the color. So maybe I want my first name and last name to be different colors, so I selected my last name here. I'll click the little square and I'll make my last name red. Draw more attention to it. But you do have to select the text before you make changes to these, otherwise it's not going to affect things. You'll be affecting like the space bar that you have at the end of your name or something instead of the whole thing. On the right side, you can also affect the way that the various modules look, changing their font and size. So if you want them to be smaller, so they take up less space, or you just want them to visually look the same as whatever you have in your identity plate. If you have a logo that you'd like to use, just choose a choice up here called Use a Graphical Identity Plate. Click there, and then you can either drag an image from your desktop to this area, or if you've copied it from maybe Photoshop, you could paste it in here. But for now, I'm going to stick to text. All I need to do to get that area customized is to turn on this checkbox to enable this identity plate. And I can also come in here and save it. If they want to use them for a magazine article or something else, they're able to look into that image at the metadata and find my contact info and know that the image is copyrighted. So let's get one of those set up as well. Then we'll move on to organizing our images. If I go to the metadata menu up here, you find many different choices, but halfway down will be Edit Metadata Presets. Edit Metadata Presets. If I choose that, this comes up, and there's a whole bunch of information that's in here. A lot of the information that's in here is not something you'd want to apply to every image. If you expand some of these areas, you'll find things like information about models that might have been in a shoot, so you can keep track of who they were if you have a model release and so on. But that would be specific to an individual image, not to every image I import. So I'm going to ignore most of these areas and concentrate on this area called IPTC Copyright. This is where I want to fill in my information of my copyright, I did the copyright symbol, which on a Mac I believe is Option G. On Windows, I'm not sure. Just Google it, and I'm sure you can find it pretty quick. And then I put my name. I set this as copyrighted instead of being in the public domain or unknown. And then I typed in all rights reserved, so people know they don't have any rights automatically. Some people use a website called Creative Commons. If you look at that website, there are simplified usage rights that you can adopt that makes it rather nice and easy, where you can say you're welcome to use these images as long as you give me credit in your project, that kind of thing. It can get your name out there in many different ways for people using it. But in this case, I'm putting all rights reserved. And then there's a copyright info URL. If you were to create a special page on your website that talks about your copyright, that has the terms of your copyright and that type of information, you could put it here. So anyway, I'm just going to put that information in. Then I'm going to go to the top menu up here, and I'm going to say Save Current Settings as a new preset. And I'm just kind of, did that say 2009? It does. We changed that to 2013. Then I'm going to save the current preset up here at the top. And I'll just put in the copyright symbol. Just give it a short name. And I'm going to click Create. Once I've done that, I'm going to hit the Done button. And now, anytime I go to import my photographs in the future, I'll hit the Import button in the lower left, just like we did on the previous day. And I believe it's over on the right side. In this area right over here is a choice called Metadata. And if I click on the little arrow next to it, I'm going to find that preset I've created. And by choosing that, now any images that I ingest into my catalog will automatically be tagged with that copyright information. And that way I don't have to think about it all that much if I ever upload these images to Facebook, Flickr, or my website or anything else. I know it's going to contain that info. And it's something where if somebody opened the image in Photoshop or another program designed for imaging, they'd be able to look at the metadata and see that. Also, if you mark it as copyrighted, I believe in Photoshop, if they open the image, there'll be a copyright symbol in the title bar of the image at the very top where it gives you the name of the picture. So that's one thing that I usually get set up, and that is sticky. So once I choose it here, it should remember it for future imports, and that way I don't have to really think about it too much when it comes to making sure all my images are tagged with a copyright. I'm not going to import any pictures right now, so I'm going to hit the Cancel button. All right, now let's talk about organizing our images a bit. Let's say that someone has asked me to use one of my images for a particular project. One project I'm working on right now is where I do light paintings of vintage trailers, because I just like vintage America and just the whole kind of vintage feel of that. And so here's a series of images that are vintage trailers. All of these have been light painted in that they're long exposures, cameras on a tripod, and the area that you're seeing where the car in this case is and the trailer would usually look just like the trees that are in this image, in that they'd be solid black, they'd be in silhouette. But I'm running through the scene with a flashlight and lighting all the different areas in the scene to make it look more interesting. And so here's the series. Let's say I need to pick one of those images to be used in maybe a magazine article or something similar. Well, instead of just going through them like we just did here, where we do this in general, a slideshow by hitting the space bar to make it fill our screen and then using the arrow keys to cycle through it, there are other ways we could deal with it. What I could do is select these images. I'll just type Command A. And then at the bottom of my screen, we've already talked about two icons that are down there, but there are two others that we haven't. And that is, this is grid view. Remember, you use the letter G to get back to it every time you want to see your thumbnails. This is loop view, and that's where your image fills the screen. And I mentioned that I use the space bar to get to that. If you hit the space bar a second time, it would zoom in to 100% view so you could check focus. And then you type G to get back to grid. Well, there are two more over here that we haven't discussed, and I just want to briefly mention them. So I want to pick out one of these images to use for, let's say, a cover image on a magazine. I'm going to click the icon that looks like an X and a Y. when I do, I'm going to see two of the images that I have selected side by side. The image on the left is known as the select. It's the one I think I'm going to be using so far. The image on the right is the one I'm considering as a replacement for that image. So I'm just trying to decide what should I like. Looking at the two images, I come in here and at the bottom of each image, I can change the rating, or on the left side, I can flag it or reject it. That's what those two icons are. Or what I'm going to do is hit the little X that's in the corner for whichever of the two that I think isn't as good out of the group of two. So I'm liking this guy over here with the whole flames going and sitting down and all that. So on the one on the left, I'll hit the letter X. When I do that, it will move the image over to the other image over to make it the select, or the one I'm currently considering, and put another image next to it. This image isn't as refined. I noticed the way I lit the foreground in here doesn't look as nice and all that, so I'm going to get rid of that one. Same with this one. I got this really dark black area and then an abruptly bright area. This is one I need to refine in Photoshop actually to get that transition to look better in other things. So I don't think it's as good. And I'm just going to keep doing that until I've gotten this down to a single image. And unfortunately, I might have already picked it though, because I really like the image on the left. But I can click the letter X under each one. Now those are pretty comparable. I think the color in this is looking a little greenish down here at the bottom to my eye, so I might need a little more adjustment to that. If the magazine needs something right away, I think that one might be more refined. So I'm just going to click the X on whichever one I don't think is going to work out for me. And again, this one. All right, so anyway, I keep doing that until I'm down to no other images. Now I have this image, and I could change my rating, or in this case, I could flag it as a pick. And if I go back to grid mode by either typing G or clicking on the grid icon, I'll find that that's the only image that's still selected. Whereas when I started out, all the images were selected. I typed Command A to get them all, or Control A in Windows. So if you ever need to narrow something down to one image, or when you're comparing images, you just want to look at one to compare everything to see, I'm thinking I might want to use this particular image. I just want to see if there's anything else better in the same folder. You can be able to view them side by side nicely, like that. Now, let's see how we can do something similar, but this time, instead of needing to pick one image, I need to narrow down a series of images and just use fewer than the whole set. So in this case, I've just switched to a different set of images. I'm going to hide the left panel just to get as much space for the images as I can. And I'll type Command A to select all. So it's thinking about all the images. Now at the bottom of my screen, instead of clicking on the icon with the X and the Y in it, I'm going to go for the icon right next to it. If I click on that one, now we get into a mode where it shows me all the pictures that I currently have selected. And with all the pictures, I just look through them and decide if there's anything I don't think is really fitting in. I think all these have a certain stylistic feel with the exception of this one, which feels more like a plain photo. I'm going to click on the little X in the lower right corner. When I do, it will make room for the other images, moving them over. And once we get rid of enough images, this one looks a little less refined than the others. Click on the X. It will continuously make them larger to make them fill the screen. And let's see if there's any others I want to get rid of. Get rid of that one. This one doesn't feel as stylistically done as the others, so I'll get rid of it. And just each time I'm going to get it so the images become larger and larger until I get it down to exactly the number I think I need. I'm going to say that's about the number I needed for a particular project. When I'm done, I go out of survey mode and just go back to grid mode. And now the images that were left over that I still had remaining on the screen will be the only ones selected. So I could copy them somewhere else, I could flag them as a pick, or increase their rating settings, or whatever I'd like to do. And so sometimes that's useful for trying to narrow down the number of photos you have. And sometimes I end up doing that, either that feature or the feature I talked about previously, when I ended up shooting more than one shot of the same subject, and I'm just trying to get it down to the single best image for it. So I'm glad those features are found there. Okay, then let's look at how you can use ratings to narrow down your images and what we can do with it. Here I've gone to another set of images, and I just want to pick out the best of these to possibly use for a project. There are many different ways I can rate my images, but one of the things that I like to do is just view them full screen by hitting the space bar. And then in order to rate them, I have many different ways I can do it. One method is to go to the photo menu and to come down here to set rating. And here I can do between 1 and 5 stars. To be honest, I never go to this menu because it's so much easier to use my keyboard. Look at how simple the keyboard shortcuts are. They're listed on the right. If you type 0, you remove any rating that's already there. If you do 1, 2, 3, or 4, or 5, that just tells it how many stars to put on. And so all I'm going to be doing is having my fingers on top of the number keys, and I'll be doing 1 through 5 to rate these. So this image I quite like. I'm going to rate it up at about a 4. I just use the right arrow key to go to the next image. And this image I like as well. I'll rate a 4. Keep going. This one I'm not liking as much because it's a bit dark. I can rate it something like a 2. And I believe I should be able to use a feature I talked about the other day. I don't know if you remember or not, but if you press the caps lock key, which I hope I just pressed, I should be able to hit a number to rate it, and it'll automatically advance. Caps lock turns on a feature called auto advance. If you don't remember that, because it's just, if you're not good at remembering keyboard shortcuts, I believe it is under the photo menu as well, right here, auto advance. So now I can come in here, and this one looks pretty good. I'm going to rate it a 3. This one I think needs a little more work. That tree that's in there is too similar in color to the rocks, so I'd probably want to adjust it to get it to separate better. Maybe I'll rate it only a 2. This needs refinement as well. This is Antelope Canyon near Page, Arizona. If you're ever near there, this is a great place to shoot. It's really difficult, though, to get the blue sky at the same time as getting this area because there's not much light down there. So this is an HDR image where I took multiple exposures that vary in brightness and I merged them together. We'll talk about that tomorrow, how to do that. But this image would need a little bit of refinement before I'm happy with it. It looks a little too blackish up here, not pure blue, that kind of thing. So I'm going to rate it a 2 because it needs more work. That one's not quite as exciting because it doesn't have the color variation, so I'll also rate it a 2. This one I'm liking a little better. That one looks like it doesn't need any refinement. It's got nice color throughout it. I'm liking it, so I'll rate it a 4. That one needs more refinement. This is a panorama. When we're in this, remember at any time you can hit the spacebar a second time and zoom up. This is a high-res image though, so it would take a while for this to load because this is a massively huge image. I don't think I rendered a preview. Well, I did render a preview. If you want to see how huge it is, let's see if I can get to, where would the waterfall be? We'll zoom up over here. It's going to have to think just because of how big it is. But that's one thing I like doing is stitching a lot of panoramas to make my camera be much higher resolution than I can get in a single shot by shooting multiples. So you see a tiny little bridge in there? That tiny little bridge at the top of the waterfall is like right down there. So anyway, I'm really liking that. I'd like to print that one big. I'm going to rate it a 5. Remember, it auto advances. So here we got a shot of Seattle. Probably also take a little while for it to load the preview. But there we have the Space Needle, where I'm in Seattle right now. The top of the Space Needle, they've painted a different color. And I like that quite a bit. Looks like it's nice, ready. I'll do a 5, maybe a 4. All right, so it didn't advance after that, so that means I've probably gone through all the images. I'm going to type the letter G to go back to the grid. All right, so now these are all rated. So what can we do with that rating? Well, there's a couple things we're going to be able to do as we progress through this session. And the first thing is we can filter our images. At the top of the grid area is what's known as the filter bar. And if you don't find this visible on your screen, this little gray bar going across the top, you're going to be able to find it, I believe, under the View menu. I'm not used to ever turning it off, but it's right there, Show Filter Bar. Keyboard shortcut for hiding or showing it is the backslash key. So if you want to get it out of the way to make your thumbnails bigger, hit backslash. Hit it again, it'll show up. If you hate keyboard shortcuts, go to the View menu. Remember, it's called Show Filter Bar. Now with the filter bar, we have different things we can filter this by, so we're not looking at all the images. One of those things is an attribute that we've attached to the image. If you remember the other day when I showed you how to narrow down some images, we talked about doing flags or picks on the image. Here's where I could filter it to only show the ones that have been flagged, the ones that haven't been flagged, or the ones that have been rejected. And to the right of that, I have a setting for rating. So I could show everything that is 3 stars or above. I could show everything that's 4 stars or higher, or the things that are only 5 stars, and that can help me narrow things down. Now I know that the ratings sound overly simple, and it's something you've possibly used before, but it's going to become much more useful when we combine it with a few other features in Lightroom. Because I have things that create automatic portfolios of my images and other things that are incorporated with those ratings. Once you've narrowed it down to only showing so many images based on ratings, if you want to get back to viewing them all, you have a choice called None right over here. Also in that filter bar, there are different settings you can search for, not just attributes like ratings and picks. You can also search based on metadata. And in this case, metadata can be a bunch of different information. Each one of these columns that is here can be changed. Right now, the column on the left is date. So if I wanted to find everything that was shot, let's say in 2012 in August, well, in this case, I only have one image that was done in August of 2012. But that's because I'm not working on my computer. I'm working on CreativeLive's images, or their computer. I've only loaded the images for this session, not for my whole photo library. Otherwise, I'd find a bunch more in here, and I could really narrow it down and find things quickly. I can tell what camera, because I've had a 5D Mark III, I've had a Mark II, and I've had the Mark Nothing, and other cameras as well. Like I've also shot with a Nikon D800. I just don't have any of the shots with me in this folder. I can pick what lens that I might have shot with to narrow it down. If I want to find ones that are only shot with really wide-angle lenses, I could look for only fisheye shots, and so on. But here's the setup that I like to have in here that I find most useful for my particular workflow. And when I do this, let me look at all of the images that I have imported for CreativeLive. So we have a large volume of images. I'll go to metadata, and you can change what each one of these columns is set to. And what I want to do is change this date column. I'll just go right up to the heading called date. When I mouse over it, I'll find a double arrow right next to the word date. And I can click to choose a different kind of search term. And what I'm going to set this to is, if I can find it, develop preset. Develop preset. And that's going to tell me in here how many images have default settings and how many images have no preset, how many are set to custom. Custom means I manually adjusted those images. So I know that those images have been refined in some way. I can also come in here, and no preset is going to tell me these images have never been adjusted. Well, no, actually, some of these have been adjusted, but not with a preset. Here, default settings. These have never been adjusted. If I look at the images, they don't have the little plus minus symbols on them. So I could think that these are ones that need to be adjusted. And so oftentimes I'll have a folder of images. Let's say it's a shoot I shot in a particular city, and I shot 500 images. Somebody asked to use some images from that particular location, and I need to find them fast. Well, I want to come in here and click on the word custom to see which ones have been adjusted compared to the ones that haven't been, that I'd have to spend more time to get ready for them. The second thing that I do in the second column over here is, instead of having it set to camera, I have it set to file type. And that way I can see what file formats are contained within the images I'm currently looking at. Because again, if somebody needs one of my images to use, I want to find the ones that have already been worked. And so if I find any that are Photoshop file format, I know that those have been adjusted and I've done something to them in Photoshop. Or if I find TIFF, those are two file formats that I mainly generate from Photoshop. And so I know that those are more refined images, most likely, than some of the others. And so it's a quick way of me finding those. The third column I often leave at lens, and that way if I need to find one that is a detail shot, it's probably going to be more for my 100 to 400 lens, a longer lens. And if I want a really wide shot, I might come over here and look for one shot with a fisheye lens or something else. It just is easier for me to find a certain style of image. Then the final one on the right side is a label. And this shows a little bit about how I set up my labels in here if we zoom up. Labels are usually just colors. You can assign like red or yellow or blue to an image, but you can also define what various labels mean by giving them text. And so I have ones that are in progress, which means that image is not yet ready to show other people, but I've started on it. I have things that are in print testing, which means I think I'm done with the image. I've made a print and it's sitting in my gallery in my home. Just so you know, I live in a motorhome, so my gallery has dual purpose, and it's really known as the gallery because it's actually the toilet room. The walls of my room where the toilet are covered with photographs, and those are the ones that I need to refine, and you have some time in that room so you can look right at them and see what needs to be changed. Once I'm done and I think I no longer need to refine them, I pull them off the wall after print testing and I set them to done. So I know any image that is set to done is completely ready for any use. 5 foot wide print, anything like that. So let me show you where you can set up those labels, and I'll set them up the way I usually use them. So if I come in here, this is where I can set my color label. Go to the photo menu and choose set color label. And you see them all there, and you see they just call them red, yellow, green, purple, and all that. And actually, I'll have to think. I think this might be in preferences. I only set it once. If not, it'll take me a moment, and I'll probably show you right after a break or something. Come on. I actually just forgot where it is. Under one of these, there will be a choice for editing your color label. And I will find that and tell you right after a break. But I assign these. Let me tell you what I assign them to. The choices that I use for number 6 is done. Any image that I know is done, is ready to be printed 5 foot wide, I'm going to set it to done. So anytime I want to find it on any folder or my entire library of images, and I know which images can be offered to be printed that big, will be set to that one. The one below it is one I call print testing. And print testing is when I think I'm done with the image, but I'm making prints and refining those prints to make sure they're really ready to be presented to the world. The one below that I set to in progress. In progress is where I've started to work on the image, but I'm not quite ready to start making prints of it. I don't think I'm quite just to that point yet. The one below that I call process soon. And process soon is where I've looked through a folder of images and I've picked out those images that I know are in focus, I know they have a good composition, I know they'd be worthwhile to refine and take through my process. The bottom one I set to evaluate. And evaluate is where anytime I'm viewing any folder on my hard drive of my images, I will mark things as evaluate, and that simply means someday check if this is in focus, check if it's technically good and if the composition is good, because I think it might be worth taking through the process and getting it to an end print, but I haven't spent the time yet to really know if it's worth that or not. And so if I set them up that way, then I'm going to turn off auto advance. Then later on, I can do things where if I ever want to get into Lightroom and I have a certain amount of time, that I can very quickly find those images that I need to just sort through and text, see if they're ready. I can look at images depending on what kind of mindset I'm in. If I'm needing to get more images ready for a big print show or something, I'll go to ones that are in progress or in print testing, and it's very easy for me to find those. And so that's the way I like to set those up. And you can set it up here with the rating and color label, or below each image where you have your little rating, to the right of it is a little square that's there, and you can click to set it there as well with that. So you can do it in many different ways. You also have keyboard shortcuts. Do you see the number keys on the right side? You have it for every one of these labels except for purple. So we can do that. I just need to remember where the heck I edited them, because I edited them once and I've never needed to change them since. So I'll look that up and tell you after I have a moment to look. All right, then let's talk even more about organizing our images. So instead of just putting ratings and colors and similar things on my pictures, to really organize things, I find I need to get to collections. Collections is one of my favorite features in Lightroom. A collection is a virtual folder. A virtual folder is where the actual folders above reflect what's on your hard drive. And if I move a picture from one folder to another in the folder list, it moves it on my hard drive. If I want a picture to be in more than one folder, I'd have to duplicate that image, and it would double the amount of storage space it takes up to use it. So using it up here in folders to organize my images, that's just from my general shoots that I've done. But collections is where I actually organize things. What I can do in collections is these are virtual folders. If I create a collection and I drag a photograph into that collection, that photo is not moved on my hard drive at all. It just remembers where it is on my hard drive without actually moving it. I can have a same photograph in as many collections as I'd like, and it doesn't take up any additional space in my hard drive. It simply remembers where the image is stored. And so the way I set up my collections is I have here some projects, like I'm writing some ebooks. So here I create a collection for ebooks. Inside I have here for my light painting ebook images and my waterfall images, because I'm doing an ebook on waterfalls. I can do here shooting suggestions is a talk that I would like to give, but I need to get enough images together for it. So here I have a little container for that, and I'll put in ones for various ideas I'd like to talk about. If I was on my main computer, this list would be much longer. Right now, it's only showing collections that contain the photos I'm using for this class. It's not showing all of my collections I have from my main machine. Then I also have, there's something called a smart collection, which I'll show you in a moment. A smart collection, in essence, is a saved search. So you know how I could search for images that have 5 stars and have a rating, or not a rating, a label of done or a label of in progress or one of those others? I can save those as searches in here. So if I go to the one called Work Me, and in here, this is where I could, if I have a few minutes of time, I feel like going to Lightroom and working a bit, right here is where I could click and look at images to evaluate. If I don't want to use too much of my mind to do things, I just want to visually look at raw photos that haven't been refined, I could click there and see all of them that have had that label applied to them. I could go over here to ones that are in progress that I know need some work. I could go to print testing. If I go into my gallery and find an image that I say, oh, there's something that needs to be changed on this image, I can pull it off the wall, come and find that image because it will definitely be in print testing, and that kind of stuff. And so let's look at how you can set these up and organize your pictures with them. If I go to collections here, go to the side menu, I can create a collection, or I can create a collection set. A collection set is the equivalent to a folder that can only contain collections. It's a container for collections. Can't actually contain pictures. So let's say I'm going to do a new project. So I'll here do create collection set. And I'll name this one Gallery Show. I don't need all caps though. Gallery Show. And I'm going to hit create. So now I have a new collection set called Gallery Show. A collection set cannot contain photographs, it can only contain collections. So now that doesn't do anything all by itself, but if I go back up to that plus sign and now say create collection, I can tell it to put it inside the collection set called Gallery Show, and I'm going to call this Landscapes. Hit create. Then I'll create another one. And I'll call this light painting. Light paintings. Put it inside the collection set called Gallery Show. And then maybe I'll do another one. So now I'm starting to organize and think about, if I were to have a gallery show, how might I organize the different areas of that gallery? On one wall, maybe I want to have some landscapes. On another wall, I want to have light paintings. And on another wall, I want images from Route 66. Now, all of the images I'm going to use for these various things would be stored in various folders up here. I could come in here and see if I can find an image, any of these, that would be a light painting or would be on Route 66. I think I have one Route 66 image right here. This image was shot on Route 66. I shot it in October of 2011. And so I'll drag that on top of the one called Route 66. Then I'll see if I went there in 2009 by chance or in 2008. There's some more Route 66. Here's the interior of a gas station, service station. And I'll just drag that into the one called Route 66. And what's nice about this is these can be from different folders. Here's another Route 66, pull it in there. And I can continue doing that. But so what's really nice about the collections is now when I click on the name of that collection, it shows me all the images that I've dragged there, even if they're contained in multiple folders. And that same image could be used in more than one of these collections. So maybe I have a different collection that is for my CreativeLive presentation, and I wanted to use the same image. Just drag it on over there, it'll remember where it's stored, and I can very quickly get to it later. So I could do the same thing with light paintings. I think I have a gallery of light paintings. I usually have one of these set up. I have one of these set up for my portfolio. And then within that portfolio one, I have various categories, like light paintings, landscapes, and so on. Just wherever I find those images, doesn't matter what folder they're contained in, and that way I can quickly get to them. So you'll see from the rest of the day, whenever I'm choosing images to use for this particular class, here's how I have it set up. Here I have a collection set called CreativeLive. If I click on that, I will see every picture that I might be using today. Then in there, I have my past courses that I've already taught here. And there's Photoshop for Photographers, which I taught. Remember, it's on special this week. I can look at the images that were used in that particular class if I need to get to them. But this is the class called Lightroom Mastery, so I open that. Inside there, I have day 1, day 2, and day 3. So I go into day 2. Here are the 4 sessions for the day. And open up one of the sessions. Here are the topics within that session. And so I'm organizing my presentation today using collections and collection sets. So when you think about collections and collection sets, just know a collection set can't contain photographs. It can only contain collections. And then your collection contains the photos. And if you need to have a sub-collection, you need to start with a collection set and then put the collections within it. So on the right side, it tells you how many images are in each. So I find that to be overly useful, but on occasion, I will end up finding an image, and I really wish I could get back to other photographs I shot in the same location, in the same shoot. And just looking at these, I can't remember what folders these were in to begin with. So one trick you can do is if you find an image and you want to go look at the other pictures that are stored in the same folder on your hard drive, click on that image and then press the right mouse button. And you're going to find a choice of Go to Folder in Library. And that means it's going to go figure out where this photo is actually stored on your hard drive, and it's going to navigate Lightroom to that folder to show you whatever other images are in there. And I just chose that, and it brought me to, let's see, I took those photos in 2012, and in June of 2012 at the Starlight Classic Campground, which is in Colorado. And I can see the other images that were there. If I had my real hard drive and I was on my normal computer here, I'd see all the other shots I took in that particular location. So once I get them into a set, it's still easy to go back and figure out where they were before. All you end up doing is you click on the image, with the right mouse button and choose Go to Folder in Library. Other things that I do with collections is so far we've only used collections and collection sets. You can also have what's known as a smart collection. A smart collection is created by hitting the plus sign and then choosing Create Smart Collection. A smart collection is like a saved search. So I'm going to name this, let's see, print testing, or I'm just going to name this portfolio. And I'm going to see if I can have Lightroom automatically come up with a portfolio for me of all my photographs on every shoot I've ever made. This will be limited to the ones I'm using for this class because I don't have my real hard drive and my real catalog here. This is limited, but I'll try to get it to automatically make a portfolio. All right, I'm going to come down here and say it must match all of the following rules. All right, first, the rating. I need to make sure it's a good-looking image, so I'm going to make sure the rating is 4 stars or is greater than or equal to 4 stars or above, right? Then I'll create a new one, and I'm going to make sure that the label that's on it is, if I had defined these the way I like to define them, the top one would be done, and the one below would be print testing. I could choose those. Since I don't have it set up, I'm going to go over here and I think I can choose, where is it? Somewhere I can choose, I thought I could choose it where I could type it in. Unfortunately, since I haven't set up those yet, I'm not going to be able to do it yet here. I thought by choosing custom I could type it in. But anyway, I can go through here and do other things. Maybe I go over here and say it's done as a pic or other things like that. I can say the pic is flagged. I'm just going to get rid of the color rating. And now I'm going to hit create and let's see if we get anything. I'm not sure because all I have for images are the ones we're using for this class. I don't have my full set of images. If I did have my full set of images, I know I could come up with many, many, many images that would match this. So I'm going to hit create, and now it's found 2 images. Those 2 images have the pic assigned to them, I believe, and also have a rating of 4 stars or above. And so I can end up creating a bunch of those, and I frequently do. So what I can do also is later on, I will show you tomorrow how to use a feature called Publish Services. And Publish Services will allow me to automatically or semi-automatically upload my pictures to various websites. And what I do is I end up using the smart collections because when I create one, I can tell it to match, how many stars rating it is, and I might have it look for ones that are in print testing or done. And then the other thing that I might put in is I can tell it in here to look for a specific folder. And so what I end up doing is either a folder or a collection. If I tell it to do a collection, I can tell it to look in my portfolio for things that are rated 4 stars or above and automatically copy it over to my iPad because I have it set up so I can do that using Dropbox. But I'll cover that tomorrow. We'll get into this in more detail. The main thing is if you ever want to see things that were all shot with a fisheye lens, that were shot maybe with high ISO settings so you can do noise reduction or other things similar to that, this is one area you can do that with. I do it with this collection set called Work Me, which finds the images that need to be processed soon, print tested, or are done. And I find it to be very useful. So there were 3 kinds. You had a collection set, which can't contain photos, can only contain collections. You have a normal collection, which you have to manually drag on top of to get images to be added to. And you have a smart collection, which is in essence a saved search. So that's your choices. I find them to be overly useful, and that's how I've structured my entire class in here. You'll find anytime I'm switching between images, I'm really just drilling down to various levels of collection sets and collections to find all the pictures that we use today. So earlier when we did compare, or we did survey or ratings, that's how I've organized them all.